You sit down in the morning with a fresh, hot cup of coffee. The steam is rising, the scent fills the air. But before the mug even touches the table, you have already left the room. Your mind is miles away, rehearsing a conversation you might have tomorrow or analyzing a mistake you made yesterday. By the time you actually take a sip, the coffee is cold. The moment happened, but you weren't actually there to live it. You simply passed through it, while looking somewhere else entirely. We tell ourselves this constant mental time travel is necessary. We call it productivity or preparation. We act as if analyzing every variable will eventually eliminate the inherent uncertainty of being alive. But we aren't solving our lives. We are just carrying invisible weight. We build heavy, exhausting universes out of thin air, and then wonder why we feel so entirely drained before the day has even really begun. Which brings up a rather uncomfortable question. What if all this constant thinking isn't actually helping you navigate life at all? If you look closely, chronic overthinking rarely leads to a resolution. It just spins in circles. Overthinking operates as an active psychological shield. When an unfamiliar or uncomfortable sensation arises, the brain immediately kicks up a wall of analytical noise. It creates explanations, narratives, and hypothetical arguments to protect us from the raw, unfiltered experience of simply being alive. We use our thoughts to avoid feeling. We construct a thick layer of language and logic to stand between ourselves and reality, because thinking about our lives feels a lot safer than actually living them. The truth is, life never reaches us in its pure, unaltered form. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer argued, no one touches reality directly. The world as we know it is a representation, a picture generated entirely by our isolated consciousness. Every raw event that happens to you must first pass through an invisible lens, a lens constructed from your specific childhood memories, your past traumas, and your deepest insecurities. This creates the 10-90 rule of human experience. 10% of our suffering comes from the actual event. The vast majority is generated by the narrative our mind spins around it. An unanswered message becomes a definitive rejection. A simple mistake turns into a permanent failure. Because we live so deeply inside these interpretations, we rarely share the exact same reality. We are all essentially surviving on our own invisible, emotionally isolated planets. So why does the brain do this? When a raw, uncomfortable feeling arises, like anxiety or a sudden wave of sadness, the brain instantly panics at the lack of control. It hates the empty space of an undefined emotion. The second we lose focus on an immediate task, a system in the brain called the default mode network takes over. This is the brain's automatic background process, and it desperately wants to organize the unknown. It grabs that formless, chaotic emotion and forcibly translates it. It locks the feeling into structured language and rigid narratives to regain a false sense of safety. But there is a fatal flaw in this translation process. The mind takes a temporary, passing emotional state and accidentally solidifies it into a permanent identity. The fleeting experience of failing at a specific task is incorrectly translated into the absolute statement, I am a failure. The temporary feeling of being rejected becomes the lifelong identity of being unlovable. The moment we translate a passing feeling into a rigid definition, we stop living the experience. We become trapped inside a cage built entirely out of our own faulty logic. Here is the relief in all of this. That harsh, overthinking voice in your head behaves like a panicked survival mechanism. It is an evolutionary alarm system doing what it was designed to do. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, observed that human freedom remains intact even in the absolute worst conditions. That freedom lives in the space where we choose our attitude toward our circumstances. You have a choice in how you handle heavy thoughts. You can grab on to every single one, treating them as absolute facts, and allow them to drag you to the bottom of your mind. Or you can treat them like leaves on the surface of a lake, observing them as they float by without attaching to them. True presence means refusing to follow the chain. It doesn't require forcing your mind into absolute silence. It just requires stepping back. If you are capable of observing the chaotic thoughts in your head, then you are the silent, indestructible consciousness behind them. You are the sky, not the storm. Real emotional freedom is found exclusively in the silent gap, that tiny space between a raw event and your mind's desperate attempt to interpret it. So the next time you sit down with a hot cup of coffee, try to catch the mind before it leaves the room. Feel the warmth of the mug. Notice the steam. Allow the sensory experience to exist completely untranslated. Internal peace grows from the courage to experience the raw, imperfect present without demanding a narrative to justify it. When you stop explaining the moment, you finally begin to inhabit it.
Angel with amnesia. Remember your essence.